As of when this video is being made, Wildwood Grove hasn't even opened up yet and Dollywood is already thinking about their next major expansion. In a recent survey sent out, Dollywood essentially pitched 3 different options for what their next roller coaster could be: a hyper coaster, an indoor coaster, and a spinning coaster. And let me tell you, none of this surprises me. Now, if you've been with Coaster Studios for a while, then you know that we love Dollywood. I personally have been a season pass holder for years. I go typically at least 3 times a year. And I've been saying for a while that Dollywood could use a B&M Hyper, an indoor coaster, and a spinning coaster. And I think I'm not the only one that's been saying that, and Dollywood has heard that, and it's very likely that whatever they decide to choose could be for the Wildwood Grove Part 2 expansion. We know for a fact that there will be a Part 2. If you look at the area that's been cleared, Wildwood Grove takes up about 5 acres. There is a huge chunk that goes all the way back to the train tracks that is going unused. That is for future expansion. Dragonflyer is the coaster opening up with the area, and it is a family thrill coaster, and it is clear that Dollywood is thinking about their next major thrill ride. Now, something to keep in mind, this does not necessarily mean that their next roller coaster will be one of these 3 rides. They might have another family coaster planned. They might have multiple rides going in before this. One of the things I consistently hear when parks talk about roller coasters is that they typically spend 2 to 3 years working on it before they manage to get it open. So the earliest I could see this happening is 2021. So I want to talk about these 3 rides and figure out which one of them would be the best fit for this park, even though all of them would be fabulous fits. First up, the B&M Hyper. Here's the only major problem with this one, is that arguably the 2 closest parks to Dollywood are Six Flags Over Georgia and Carowinds, and both of them have a B&M Hypercoaster. Now, as for the good things about this, is that Dollywood is a terrain park. Very few of their coasters sit on flat ground. So if you did a B&M Hyper, it would almost have to work in with the terrain, which could make for a very unique ride experience, and it might make it one of the most different B&M Hyper coasters ever built. And this would by far, out of the 3 of these, make the public the happiest. Because it's big, it's tall, it's fast, it's graceful, it's smooth. The public eats that kind of stuff up. If you ask a member of the public what their favorite ride at Dollywood is, they won't say Lightning Rod. They'll tell you it's Wild Eagle. They like the big and tall rides that are not too aggressive. B&M Hypercoasters are known for being graceful. They would love this. Lightning Rod, I think, was more intense than a lot of the public was expecting. It's all about ejector airtime. This would be all about the floater airtime. So I think easily this would become the most popular ride in the park if they decide to go with this option. They just have to decide if it is worth it to add something like this, considering that nearby parks also have this. Next, let's talk about the indoor coaster. And unlike the hyper coaster, the manufacturer of this is very unclear. They show 3 pictures, each from 3 different manufacturers. Rock and Roller Coasters of Vekoma, Verbolten is a Zero, and then they show Flying Aces at Abu Dhabi, which is not an indoor coaster, but that's an Intamin. But it is clear that with this ride, the manufacturer could be multiple different things, because what they're talking about is less about the roller coaster and more about the experience, because they're talking about the theming, the story, elaborate scenes, animatronics, projection mapping. We're talking about a very highly themed experience, which is something that I'm guessing the B&M Hyper Coaster would not be. You could still do theming in the Queue Line station, but this would have a lot of theming during the ride. They're talking about 2 to 4 minute thrill ride, which implies it wouldn't really be a family coaster, but it would stop you to do certain things like tell the story. I think this would be a fabulous fit for Dollywood. One of the things they're lacking is indoor rides. They have, right now, Blazing Fury. Mystery Mine has some indoor sections, but is not a completely indoor coaster. And when Wildwood Grove opens, they'll have an indoor play structure. That's about it. And remember, Dollywood is open during the winter, and I have been to this park when it is snowing, and the only thing open is Blazing Fury. So another indoor coaster would be fantastic. And Blazing Fury in itself is almost more of a dark ride than a roller coaster. And this really sounds like a blend of it, but we're talking about a lot more of a thrilling experience than Blazing Fury. That ride only has a couple of dips, and with a lot of indoor coasters, launches are involved, which I would not be surprised if this ride decided to do. Because when it's an indoor ride, you typically can't go super tall, and so you have to make up that speed some other way, which often equates to a launch. So I like this option a lot. And finally, we have the spinning coaster. Unlike the B&M Hyper Coaster, this ride would be completely unique to this section of America. Carowinds, Six Flags Over Georgia, Kentucky Kingdom, Kings Island, none of these parks have a spinning coaster. And the pictures they're showing are of Time Traveler, which is an extreme spinning coaster. And I think of all the rides here, this one makes the most common sense to add next. And the reason I say this is because as soon as Silver Dollar City opened Time Traveler and we saw how much of a success it was, it only made sense to do another one and send it to Dollywood, their sister parks. And typically when one park gets something that's really popular, they add it to the next. They've done this in the past and they'll do it again. Time Traveler was a fantastic addition, very unique, and I would love to see more of these. And even though it's called an extreme spinning coaster, the controlled spin really allows it to appeal to a bigger range of people. Sure, there will always be people that aren't going to be a big fan of spinning coasters because they'll be afraid of getting sick. But those who decide to ride it will find that it'd be pretty hard to get sick on this because it is not going to spin like teacups. If they did decide to go with something like this, don't expect a drop out of the station like what Time Traveler does. This would have a completely unique layout. And if I'm guessing their next major coaster goes where I think it would go, back behind Wildwood Grove, there is a lot of flat land in that area, but there's also a hillside that they could work in, but not one big enough to do a drop out of the station like Time Traveler. And when speaking of that plot of land and which one it might best serve, oddly enough, I think it might serve the indoor coaster the best because a lot of it is flat ground. They have a huge area where they could fit a really big indoor coaster. If they decide to put this major thrill ride somewhere else, then it would likely be a lot more terrain based, and I don't see them going with indoor coaster. So it really just depends on a couple of factors, but at the end of the day, I would not have a problem with any of these. I think these are all fantastic fits, and whatever they decide to go with next will be a welcome addition to the park. But just think, even if they go with one of these, that does not mean that they won't add the other two. It is certainly a possibility that they could add the remaining two coasters in the future. It might just take a little while longer. Assuming this next coaster does go in Wildwood Grove, I would say the indoor coaster is probably the best fit because they could make it immersive, fit with the area, and that plot of land back there is flat, would really serve an indoor coaster well. But it's like I said, they really have to take in their audience, think about which one would better serve them. If they want that big, tall hyper coaster that they know will probably become the most popular ride in the park, or that spinning coaster that's very unique to the area and a really fun ride, but maybe won't be the public's new favorite ride. In terms of price, I'm guessing that one of these isn't obviously going to be more expensive than the other. Just taking a rough estimate, I would say the Extreme MACK Rides spinning coaster would be the most expensive. Time Traveler was $26 million. A B&M Hyper Coaster is typically over $20 million, but I think if Dollywood's worked in the terrain, then it might end up costing around the same as the Extreme Spinning Coaster. And indoor coasters really fluctuate. Verbolten was $50 million. It really just depends on how immersive and story-driven they decide to make it, because think of all those animatronics that they'd want, the detail, all of that adds up. So I think that's why Dollywood pitched these three options, because no matter what they go with, they're going to be spending around that same amount of money for each of them. They're just curious to see, of all the regular visitors to Dollywood, which they want to see. And if I had to take a guess, I think most people are going to select Hypercoaster. But at the end of the day, Dollywood doesn't have to listen to them. They could do whatever they want. But if anything, I think this proves that Dollywood's future is looking so bright. I mean, we already knew that. The park is fabulous. Wildwood Grove looks amazing. They're expanding so rapidly that the fact that they haven't even opened up their largest expansion ever and they're already talking about what is next is really impressive. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on what ride you think they should go with. If you like the three choices they're presenting, be sure to post all that down in the comments below. And stay tuned for more rumors and news videos here at Coaster Studios. Be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you guys next time.